path,
I think
regardless of what
we're
people
on.
think about the president-elect. And
I think we're on a great path. It's a hazardous path. It's a path where the future is not at all certain, but humanity is at one of those moments, one of those
Yes.
crossroads where you kind of stand on the edge of an abyss and you don't quite know what lies ahead. And we can take a really great path out of this, or we can take a really horrible path out of
Right.
this. And I think the key issue is that we do actually have choice. It doesn't have to be that way. I see a lot that's positive out there in the world. I do think people are waking up. I think they are questioning old structures. They're refusing to put up with the bullshit any longer. More and more people are doing that. It's happening in the realm of politics. It's happening in the realm of dealing with the big corporations. It's happening in the realm of investigating the past. We're just not going to be told what to think anymore. That's encouraging, but then on the other side, there are huge efforts being put precisely into making people think in certain ways, whether it's the advertising industry, whether it's political messages. And so we have to be aware of that. And it could go down the drone path. I mean, like the beehive path, which would be, why even bother to be human if your society is turning you into a worker drone and a beehive life existence? Or it could go down an expansion of consciousness and a realization of the incredible, beautiful potential of the human race.
I
We're at
honestly
that
feel
point.
like that's where it's going.
I do too.
I honestly do.
I'm optimistic. I'm very optimistic.
Well, that's beautiful to hear, because this is a time. Like, I was watching the John Oliver show. It's a great show on HBO. Very funny guy, and he's very left-wing leaning, as is his show. But they had this "fuck 2016" thing where they were just naming off all the horrible things that happened in 2016. They're like, and then just saying goodbye to this terrible year. I'm like, yeah, but a lot of good shit happened this year too. There's a lot of fantastic discoveries, a lot of interesting observations. A lot of people learned a lot of things in 2016 as well. And I think that,
and quite a number of American states have made cannabis legal.
yes, that's, I think,
It's a huge development.
it's also it's going to be a big factor in our cultural evolution. It really will.
Well, it was a big factor. In the 60s, it was a huge factor. In effect, what happened, you had a very closed conservative society, and then you had an outside shock in the form of the psychedelic drugs that came in and completely stirred up everything in art and music and fashion, and even into scientific concepts of our place in the universe and time and space, and in so many ways that had just a major impact on the direction that our society went. And what would be the equivalent today or in our near future in terms of an outside shock that would suddenly wake people up would be another event, another Tunguska event. And based upon everything that I've seen, it would suggest that events like that are going to happen, and probably within our lifetime. And when it does happen, especially if the message of the story has been out and enough people have heard it, 5% of the people or 10% of the people are aware that there is this major impending potential paradigm shift, and then we have an event like that, an event like Tunguska 1908, I think that's all it would take, because the magnitude of that event would have been such that it occurred today, and you had anywhere from 1 million to 2 million people instantly wiped out, or a whole city instantly annihilated from a shot from space. What effect would that have on the planetary consciousness?
And which, with this latest exercise, NASA coming late to the party finally seems to be thinking about. That what happened if LA is hit by a 350-foot diameter?
Right, and that's the thing, is because when the probability models for a Tunguska type event were first laid out in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s, it was pretty much determined that it was like something that would happen once a millennium, once every couple of millenniums. Then it sort of got contracted to once every few centuries. It may be that it's actually much more like 1 or 2 a century, or maybe even perhaps clustered events where you may have 3 or 4 or half a dozen of those type events occurring over a very short window of time. But an event like that happening, not one that would cause the extinction of civilization by any means, but an event like that could, wipe out 1,000 square miles of landscape completely in an instant, would have a major effect, I think, on the people of this planet.
It would focus minds.
It would focus minds in a way that nothing else would. And it's not, to me, is it pessimistic to say that might be what it's going to take, or is it just realistic? I don't know.
Well, I think it's like the massive impact versus the slow trickle effect. I mean, is it going to happen eventually, or is it going to happen in one gigantic swoop because of an event like a asteroidal impact where it kills a bunch of people and we wake up to the fragility of our existence?
But
here?
either way, it's a waking up of humanity, and that is in process.
It's happening.
That is in process now. Look, as a Brit, observing what's been happening in America as an outsider, I'm enormously encouraged by the legalization of cannabis movement that is taking place here, and what it all means. Sure, I like to smoke a joint, but this is not about getting high. It's not about recreation. What this is about is recognizing the sovereignty of adults to make decisions over their own bodies, their own health, and their own consciousness while doing no harm to others. That's what it's about, and that's a really fucking important issue. That is, for me, that is the most important issue, because if we live in a society that is not prepared to recognize adult sovereignty over one's own body and one's own consciousness, then that cannot be a free society in any meaningful way. And so I applaud the people of America in those states who have voted for full legalization. That's a brilliant thing to do, and that's going to have an impact around the world, because the war on drugs, all the ideology and lies about cannabis are all going to be proved wrong. We're going to know that the emperor wears no clothes, that you can legalize cannabis and civilization does not fall apart, as the war on drugs lobby have been telling us for ages. It's going to change everything, and it's a beautiful thing because it's the American people, whereas the American state, America as a governmental state presence on the world stage, has been the dark force behind the war on drugs. So it's for me a beautiful thing that it's the American people, state by state, who are winding that back and saying, we will not put up with this shit anymore.
I think what you were talking about earlier is really important too. We were talking about different factions of our civilization are creating, to this day, they're still creating disinformation and still trying to mislead people. But I think that goes to what we were talking about before, where it's a system and systems protect themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And I think
they develop almost a consciousness of their own. It's scary in a way.
Yeah.
Big bureaucracies, armed bureaucracies, they got a kind of personality.
Well, even when there's no financial stake in it, there's just a social stake, like what you're seeing right now with the left versus the right. Yeah. Like there's some people, like my friend Wanda Sykes just got booed off stage at something last night, apparently, where she went on some anti-Trump rant, and people got super upset at her. There's these systems that are in place. This almost like wanting to fight. Like it's not. It sets us up in this bizarre team mentality where this left protects its ideas of the future and the right protects its ideas. And I'm watching these people go at it back and forth on social media, and it's toxic. And I don't like to use that term because it's so compromised by, toxic sexuality or toxic masculinity. There's so many uses of that word in our culture. But I think that this desire to fight with each other.
Yeah, and be deeply unpleasant and say really horrible, hurtful, ghastly things. You see it so often in really, vile.
And from the left, too, as well as the right. The left is supposed to be the people that are
Toxic's the right word.
Exactly. And I think that we have to resist the urge to fight. I think this is when people push too far on the left, that's when the alt-right emerges. When people push too far on the right, that's when the left comes up. And, that's when, Kent State emerges. You have all these weird factions duking it out that have so much in common. Yeah. And a lot of times the things that they don't have in common, it's either because of an ignorance or it's because of an ideological dispute or a lack of communication. And I think if those three things are in place, at least open lines of communication, which is also fostered by marijuana. You get these people talking openly and vulnerably about these things, and you find out that a lot of our misgivings and our misunderstandings about each other are just misconceptions, miscommunications. Yeah. And even if we disagree on things, I have friends that I disagree on a lot of stuff with, but we're very close. Yeah, because you're allowed to have different opinions.
Of course, that's what makes the world interesting.
It doesn't have to be we hate each other because one person's
we
left.
can listen to somebody else's opinion with empathy rather than with hatred or anger.
It's too attractive to be on a team. like the fucking Masons.
It's the herd mentality.
Yeah, it is, man. It's too attractive. It's too attractive, and we love. I mean, we love city versus city. We love that. We love when Chicago is going to take on Cleveland. Fuck you. We love that.
It's the
stuff.
tribal. It's
Yes.
the tribal thing. We've not really evolved out of that. We've changed our social structures, but we're still tribal mentality. Nationalism is just tribalism writ large. That's all it is.
It really is. Just like religion's just a cult with a lot more people.
Yeah.